Oh, hello, everybody, and welcome to Instructional Designers in Offices drinking coffee or tea or hot chocolate or even cool beverages such as water, milk, iced tea, whatever floats your boat, whatever suits your palate, gang.
Protein shake.
Protein shakes. Can you do that hot?
You suppose you could, but I don't think it's gonna taste like a mocha.
All right, I'll stick with my coffee. Folks, before we jump in today, as always, Instructional Designers in Offices is brought to you by Domino One. Our LCMS product is the solution that a lot of organizations turn to create, manage, and deliver impactful learning at scale and solve lots of problems within their organizations. Don't forget to check us out, domino.com. That's DOMINKNOW.com. And hey, today we have Dave Vance with us. Dave, before we jump into our topic, tell the folks a little bit about yourself, your background, where you're coming from, those kinds of details.
Well, sure. Glad to be with you today. So currently, I would describe myself as author and educator, but my journey really started at Caterpillar a long time ago. I was their chief economist and head of the business intelligence group. And then I had a chance to start the corporate university for Caterpillar. And that's how I got introduced to the field of learning, which I found I really loved. And after leaving Caterpillar, then I wrote my first book, Business of Learning. I use that when I teach in graduate programs for human capital management. Then I started the Center for Talent Reporting, focused on bringing standards and best practices to the learning in HR field. That has since closed down and been absorbed by the ROI Institute. So that's a brief history of what I've been up to, as well as writing a few more books on measurement.
And measurement's what we're talking about today. And part of the anchor for that is the work that you've done around a new ISO standard that we were talking a little bit about in the green room. And I'm going to bet that most folks listening don't even realize that there is an ISO standard for measurement in our space.
And I think this is really exciting for a couple of reasons. It's the ISO standard 30437. So 3437 is the number of the standard. You can find it at ISO.org. You'd have to purchase it, but I think it's well worth it. Result of 2 years' work by experts around the world to try to bring together in one document what metrics we would recommend for the field. And more than that, to provide a common language, common framework for us as a profession. And I think that's why this standard is so important. We can get into in a minute about what it contains and the framework and the number of measures. But I think just essentially a framework and common language is so important to a profession. In fact, I don't think you can consider yourself a profession without it. Our inspiration back in CTR was accounting. Accounting has more than 100 measures. We have about 150 in L&D, about 700 across all of HR. We've got lots of measures. So what do we do with them? Accounting had the same issue. They divide them into 4 categories: expenses, revenue, assets, and liabilities. They have statements like the P&L and the balance sheet. They all know where to put them. So if you go to schools and accountants, you learn the terms, you learn the definitions, you learn how to calculate them, you learn what to do with them. So what do we have in our profession that's like that, that provides the same kind of guidance? Now, when you think about it, don't all professions have some kind of framework, and haven't they agreed on a common language? Chemists have the periodic table. Biologists have figured out a way to classify all forms of life. So if we're going to be a true profession, we need, at least with regard to the measurement area, that common language and framework. And we got to start from Kirkpatrick and Phillips, who gave us the 5 levels. But with 150 measures, we go way beyond program evaluation. That accounts for about 10 measures out of the 150. So what do we do with the other 150? And people are always saying, where should I start? You got so many measures. The Phillips and Kirkpatrick have written so many books. It's overwhelming. Where do I start? If I'm a smaller organization, what's my starting point? And so that's what we came together and created this standard. to try to provide the guidance that I think is so important for a profession and so practical for our profession to give people that common language, a framework, and a starting
Yeah.
point.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, Dave, and I got to know you as you were starting on that work, and I was excited that we're actually at that point starting to develop a standard because in our world, the standard when we think of standards, we think, oh, ICC, SCORM, XAPI. Although fortunately, maybe some of you know of e-learning engineer, which is a standard for describing the profession a bit that has started up. But when I think about the standards that we're familiar with, and measurement in particular, is the measurement that we have is almost a end result or victim of what was available with SCORM or AICC. And of course, one of the things I saw with XAPI is it opened up, and yes, you could have more than test results or test item interaction, which was the advanced stuff. But then it was like you could have everything, and then it's like, of course, now we pretty much have nothing out of the box. And there's been a very, very slow adoption of a lot of these things. And I was kind of wondering with some of these standards and setting that up, you talked about a lot for folks who have gone from a small handful to having a lot, even if it's set for them. Which ones do I use? How do I operationalize them? This seems too difficult. I'm going to move on. Tell us a little bit about that, Dave, and how we're countering that.
And we hear that a lot, that it's so hard and that we want to make it simpler because it doesn't have to be as hard as it is. And I think one of the reasons it's been hard is because we don't have a common language and a common framework. And without that, every person you talk to has a different approach. And pretty soon your mind is just swimming from all these different approaches. You don't know what to do. So in this ISO standard, for instance, ISO recognizes that it's easier for large companies to do more complex things. So their standard is going to read measures for a small or medium-sized company and 52 for a larger company. So there's 19 as a starting point. And of course, you want to start with the basic, like number of participants. So unique and total participants, which LMSs these days easily provide people. And beyond that, something like a cost, a seemingly simple term, but calculating cost and learning is not always that simple. And you've got program costs, you've got department costs. So let's have one definition for cost. So when an organization like ATD puts out a benchmark survey and asks everyone to share their cost, you've got apples to apples coming in and not apples to oranges, which is what we have today. And how about something simple like completion rate? That's one of those you mentioned have been around for a long time. And that sounds simple to begin with, but is it? What do you use as a denominator in the completion rate? Obviously, the numerator is those who completed the course, but what's under that? What's in the denominator? Some people use all those who registered for the course, and maybe that's the best you can do. But if it's strategic or goal-based learning, and you have worked with a goal owner to define a target audience, and it's required learning for that target audience, then shouldn't that target audience be in the denominator? Shouldn't that be what you compare it to? Because we all know some people who are supposed to take a course don't even register for it. So you've got slippage there. Some who register for it don't actually attend it. Some who attend it don't complete it. So there's a long path from who's the audience to those who complete it. So even something as simple as completion rate needs the help of a standard to explain what I just did. So if it's one type of learning, you should use the target audience agreed upon with the goal owner or stakeholder. If it isn't that type of learning, it's just out there for discretionary consumption, then use those who register to calculate the completion rate. But if we could just come to agreement on how to define these things, how to measure them, how to report them, I think we would make a great improvement.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. Some of my background, I did way more statistics and measurement than I thought I'd ever do in my life. It was very eye opening because I think some of the basic things of looking at those results, you can't necessarily compare A to B if they aren't even defining it in the same way. And they may be using the same words, but just say you talked about the denominator, using a different denominator, you're going to come up with very different things. I think early days of AICC and SCORM, the interpretation was open enough that 100 could be 100 points or it could be 100%. And you even had some distinctions and problems early on in there before people settled into, oh, we really meant percent. I think that is a huge problem here in the industry. I guess for everyone out there, maybe you could tell a little bit about what is the standard process. How long has this standard been out? And what kind of adoption have you seen either in different types of measurements, or I assume you can adopt parts of it because only parts of it apply
Sure
to
you
your
can.
particular situation.
Yeah. So the standard came out in June of 23. So it's been out just a little over 2 years now. And for the first year, it was actually the most often downloaded standard in this part of ISO that focused on human capital. It's called Technical Committee 260 on Human Capital Management, producing numerous standards. But for the first year, it was the most popular downloaded standard. So there is demand for it. And when I talk to people, more and more know about it. Sometimes when I speak at a conference now and I ask, maybe a third of the people raise their hand and say they've heard of it versus 2 years ago when no one had heard of it. So something like this is slow adoption. Obviously, ISO doesn't have any money for marketing. So there's no marketing. It's all word of mouth. And it just kind of grows organically. But I think more people are looking at it. And it runs about 220 US, 177 Swiss franc. It's out of Geneva, Switzerland, is the headquarters of ISO. But it's 42 pages long. So it gives you a lot of detail. It's going to share the common language with you. It's going to define and name 52 measures, show you examples of how to use them. It's going to start by sharing a framework with you. Like, shouldn't you, as a middle model, have maybe 5 types of users? So when you go talk to people or they ask you for a measure, you can kind of classify them as whether they're a senior leader, the CLO, a program manager, maybe an individual learner, because they all have different needs. And after that, maybe we could agree on 4 broad reasons to measure. Because again, when someone asks you for a measure, what you want to say, tell me more. Tell me how you want to use that. What do you want to do with that? What kind of report would you like to see? And because, especially for non-learning people, they don't know the field like we know it. They may ask you for something because they've heard that name before, but that isn't really what they need. And if they explain to you why they want to have it and what they're going to do with it, you could say, oh, let me suggest this and this for you. I think this will give you what you need. So let's have a mental model of who the users are and the reasons to measure. And because we have these 150 metrics, and it wouldn't make sense to arrange them alphabetically, let's group them into efficiency, effectiveness, and outcome measures, just 3 buckets. And let's organize the standard this way. So when you look at the tables for the recommended measures in this ISO standard, and this was a great insight from the group. I wish I would have thought about it at CTR, but I didn't. But the international group did. They said, Dave, you got to make this easy to use. And people are going to get requests maybe from their CEO. You might get a phone call or an email saying, I'd like to start looking at some learning metrics. Recommend 10 that you think I might be interested in. The standard is arranged so you can do that easily. Look in the table, look at the column for senior leader. It's going to have 9 metrics checked. So you could take those and go back to your CEO and say, here actually is a list of metrics recommended ISO for your consideration as a starting point. And voluntary. It doesn't carry the force of law. So it's all voluntary. It's meant to be a starting point. The CEO may look at that list and say, I like 7 of those. I don't think these 2 apply. I don't care about them. Fine. Great. So you've got 7. And furthermore, they'd like to see something that isn't on the list. Wonderful. Now you got a list slightly different than ISO recommended, but that's okay. It served as your starting point. And when someone in the future asks you for a list of measures, you can all now say, here is what ISO recommends for our consideration and as a starting point.
Hmm. For some of the conversations that we have, like your example with senior leadership, just even being able to use that phrase, this is what ISO recommends, should also help ease the conversation or lubricate the conversation because it's a recognized international standards body that they will have recognized from other
Right.
standards that they should be familiar with too. So that's Because part of what we struggle with is so many folks think about training as the same thing as when they went to school, right? Someone telling them a bunch of info and there's a quiz at the end or whatever. When taking that mental model, as you've used the phrase, and that's what the training department is, but being able to point to something internationally recognized with the reputation of the ISO bodies gives a lot of clout, I think, just for that kind of conversation to be able to validate, help people understand that we're not just pulling this out of our hat, you know?
Right. Exactly. We didn't make it up. Dave didn't make it up. There's a body who had to look at this. And it's a very, very rigorous process. So if someone then says, oh, but here ISO has a standard, but I really believe that 5 other countries agree to proposal before we can even proceed to make a standard. And then you have to get input from all these other member nations. And there's checks all along the way. And when you get a draft done, then you send it out to the 172 national standard setting bodies around the world. And in our case, we got back 24 pages of comment in small font size. And each one had to be addressed, had to say whether we agree with it, we don't, if we don't, why not, and what we're going to do about their comment, their suggestion, and then make your final draft. So it's a very rigorous process. No one would think it's perfect, but it's very rigorous. And out of that, you get the best thinking from around the world. And you come up with a global standard. It doesn't just use European language or North American language. It's meant for global use.
Well, that's something I was thinking about too. And for those of you who don't know, XAPI, which we know that standard, a lot of those just recently, relatively recently, I think in the last year or so, got an ISO approval standard for that, even though it was already an approved standard in ADL, but as a full ISO, which, as you mentioned, is a lot more rigorous. I think one thing I take away from that in this standard is that some of the best minds have been thinking about this. It's been open to a lot of their conversations, and it's very applicable, and it gives you that starting point. I was wondering maybe you could share, if you know of some examples of some orgs who picked even one or a couple pieces of it and how they applied that and how that changed results or change interpretation results, because the results don't really change. It's really about actually
Right.
getting what you want and being accurate about it and reliable.
Yeah, and I don't have a list, obviously. No one has to report who's adopting it or how much of it they're using. So I don't have a list. And I actually don't remember any names of the people who come up to me and said they are adopting it. And when I've asked what they've been doing, they said, we started with the language and the framework. We've begun to use that within our team. And that's a really important beginning to make measurement sustainable, is to, within your own team, regardless of what the rest of the world is doing, start using your own common language and a common framework and using that as a checklist. And that's, I think, how organizations like to do it. Most of them look at that 19 record how they're doing. I have all 9 of those already. And if you got all 19 of those already, you're up to the 52 that are recommended for large organizations. So what people are doing is they're adopting pieces of it. I don't think anyone's going to adopt all of it overnight, but they start by adopting the language, the framework, hopefully begin using those different groups of users and the different types of measures and the reasons to measure, and then refining their definitions of the measures so they match the ISO definition. And then just slowly through time, and we tell people it's not a one-year project. For most of us, coming up with a good measurement reporting strategy is a multi-year journey. You're not going to get to the 52 or greater number overnight. It's going to take a while. And you want to do it thoughtfully. It's not just about the count of measures. It's about how they're being used, and whether they're the right ones, and whether it's providing the information people need in your organization. So a long answer, no. And no one organization comes to mind. I don't know if anyone has adopted all 52. It's out there for public consumption, and we hope people just take a look at it. And I think they'll find it helpful. And I think it'll make their own measurement and reporting strategy a lot easier. to sell and to execute.
Well, and I think that's a part of it. It provides that framework to help fill. Ultimately, one aspect of it is to show that your learning has a return on investment. But some of the standards is teams are probably already collecting some of the data points that they need. And some of the standards just provides the framework, helps that data to be more accurate, reliable, because you have clear definitions around it. I suspect maybe some of the other measurements might be data points. Well, probably are data points, at least for some orgs, that they're not collecting. Can you share some of the types of data that people are already collecting that this helps them to be more accurate, provide a framework, and perhaps some data points that are less typically collected that the measurement talks about?
Well, sure. We mentioned unique and total participants, and this whole total participant idea before LMSs, it was very difficult to get unique away from total participants, but there's still some confusion, even in our field, and there shouldn't be any more about the difference for those. You want to measure both, you want to report both. Some people still think they choose one or the other that they would want to get. No, you need both unique and total participant. We need to agree on the cost definition. So in addition to that, so those are some of the more common ones that everyone's probably doing already. There are a lot of learning ops type of measures, even in the 19, but certainly in the 52. And by that, I mean number of courses you have on offer. How many of those were used? So you get a utilization rate for courses, number of unique hours on offer. How many unique hours are used? Utilization rate for hours. Help you select courses. Maybe there's some that are, so learning ops, total hours being used. So cost at the department level, which by the ISO definition, which agrees with the ATD definition, you have to include tuition reimbursement costs. I would imagine many are not doing that today. So some L&D departments do not have tuition reimbursement. It's handled by someone else in HR. And so when they send their data to ATD for benchmarking, they're not including that. And yet that is part of the definition. And tuition reimbursement, some companies spend a lot of money on that. And it really increases what you're spending on learning. So just that is going to make a great difference when you look at cost per participant, whether you include it, all of your tuition reimbursement or not. So there's an example of where a definition would be very helpful to do that. Other things like the application rate, looking at some of the effectiveness measures. We know everyone's measuring level 1 participant reaction. Got that. The standard also recommends that you do a goal owner level 1. Most organizations don't do that. So when you have the opportunity to support one of your goal owners, like the head of sales, the head of manufacturing, the head of quality, and you've designed learning specifically to help them accomplish their goal, then aren't you curious what they're saying about you behind your back? Wouldn't you like to know? Because they are talking about you behind your back. So why don't you give them at the end of the program or the end of the year a short survey monkey survey? How were we with? Did we deliver on time on budget? Would you recommend this to your fellow vice presidents? It's pretty simple. This isn't going to take much of your time. When we started doing that at Caterpillar, I learned a lot. Even though I was talking to each of my 28 VPs twice a year, for whatever reason, they were willing to be more honest in survey than they were face to face. Yet I learned we had some problems I did not know about when I gave them this survey. So that's a level 1 goal owner satisfaction. And then how about level 3? Seriously, as a profession, aren't we ready today to measure level 3 application for every single course? And that is not happening today. I think if you look at the data, more people are saying they do some application. A majority would say they do some, meaning they do it for a few courses. But why wouldn't you want to know whether all the work that you've put in and the time the participants have put in is actually being put to use, that they're applying it on the job? Because if they're not, that is scrap learning. It's a waste. And we know the figure for our industry is embarrassingly high and around 50% waste. So isn't this an issue we want to address? We want to improve, but how are you going to improve it if you don't know what it is? And I would challenge people to say, well, but Dave, that certainly isn't necessary for something like compliance. We just want to get it done so we have a record give us legal protection. But wait a minute, seriously? When you're teaching sexual harassment, you don't really care if your employee stopped harassing other gender? You should care. Don't you want to know that even compliance training is making a difference? So here's one that ISO has recommended for the larger organizations. Level 3 application for every course. Stop making excuses. And you can easily add the level 3 intent to apply question to your existing post-event survey. You're already asking 10 level 1 questions in your post-event survey. Add one question on intent to apply. Ask the learner whether they intend to apply or think they can apply what they've just learned. And if it's a longer course with multiple learning objectives, the better way to do it is ask what % of the content you think you'll be able to apply. This can be automated. You can do that even in SurveyMonkey. You have a decile scale. This isn't hard. An intent to apply is a great leading indicator of actual application. But if you only have a choice of one, then we're going to recommend get the intent to apply, because if there's a problem with the application, if you get a large percentage saying they don't think or will not be able to apply it, you shouldn't offer that course again until you fix the problem. Go talk to their supervisors, talk to the goal line. There's a problem someplace. Fix it before you do it again. So I want the leading indicator first. If you have the resources, do a follow-up study 3 months later and get actual application, fine. But in most cases, the response rate to that survey is going to be very low. Yep, the intent to apply, the early warning sign. So that's an example of something. Everyone's doing level 1. We all do level 2 where it's appropriate. Let's do level 3 for every single course, whether it's survey or observationally based. We as a profession need to be doing level 3 for every course. And we've got to reduce this horrendous scrap rate. If our CFOs and CEOs actually knew what the profession's scrap rate was, they would probably just eliminate L&D. It would confirm their worst fears, that we are wasting company money. So it's an inside reality. None of us tells our CFOs or CEOs how bad we are, but we are terrible as a profession, and we need to do something about it.
Well, I think that's part of these is terrible. We probably couldn't even go ahead and be accurate about how terrible we are. The first one, even starting some of the simple ones that people are probably already doing, some of the problems is that either they aren't doing it yet and they're not quite sure where to start, how to word something, but how you word something, whether it's a 10-point scale or a 2-point scale and some of those other factors that go into it, when you ask it, these are all things that do have an impact. And having that standard to just guide you to those questions and know that, honestly, I don't need to think about this too much. I can just go ahead and follow that is a great way to start. But that level 3, and for those of you who have not heard that term, it's, hey, does the learning have an impact on what it's supposed to be teaching? Are they actually doing some of those or making changes?
Yeah, level 3 is application, right? So you want the right people to take it. That's level 0 efficiency measure. Then you want them to give you a good reaction to it, level 1. You want them to learn it. That's level 2. Then you want them to apply it on the job, and that's level 3, which hopefully then for strategic learning will translate into impact and business results. That's level 4. Kirkpatrick and Phillips have different definitions for level 4, but using one of the two, you're going to get results or impact. And if you take the Phillips approach and get level 4 impact, like sales went up 2% due just to learning, then you can calculate level 5, the ROI, to answer the question whether it was worth it or not, because it's always possible that even though your learning was very successful through application and impact, you spent more on it than it's ever going to return, and it wasn't worth doing. So those are your levels 0 through 5 are, again, part of our overall framework for learning. If we can just get everyone to there who have 10 levels or more, but as a question, as a starting point. If we all just agree on definitions for these 5 or 6 levels, and to your point, people need guidance, not just on that theory, but here exactly is how to word the question, when to ask the question, and the standard includes that. So the standard includes how to ask the question, when to ask the question. And even for the level 4 impact, the Phillips level 4 impact, which so confounds our industry still today, that we share, if you're going to follow the Phillips approach to isolate the impact, the standard includes the most common isolation method, the participant estimation method, which doesn't require a control group and doesn't require any statistics. So the standard goes so far as to provide that in the appendix, saying here, if you're new to this, if you don't know what that means or how you would do it, here, take a look. It's not as hard as people made it out to be.
And that's something that, and I think all of us who haven't done deal with measurement, or let's face it, there are some of the folks in training, just like in every profession, go math, measurement. You know, but when you have that framework and getting started up, and I think it's mostly because of lack of internal business partnership. And one of the things that struck me, Dave, as you were talking about this is there's no one measurement that gives you the answer. Multiple measurements feed into how am I applying it. And the one you gave an example of, if I have no participation, well, very limited participation from my business that I'm working for, asking that question of the learners at the right time, because that matters, following that guideline is something I don't really need that help. And I'm postulating here is that if I started collecting that information and perhaps some other points that I don't need as much cooperation from the business partner, that I'd start to get some data that would help me to go ahead and frame my conversation with my business partners. Hey, I'm already getting this and it's showing this. I'm concerned or want to, this is looking good. I want us both to look good. Here's a framework for how we can get the next piece and think about it. You don't have to think about it. Have you
Exactly.
seen or heard antidotes from folks who have, run into that experience once they try this?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. So you're right. And apart from the whole math thing, a lot of people in our field would say they got into our field because they don't like math. And here we are talking math. So sorry about that. But what we're trying to do is make it simple and straightforward and provide the guidance that's been lacking. So it makes it more accessible for everyone to do it. And then you're right. We can gather enough data through what our LMS has, through our level 1, and through the post-event survey, especially if you add the level 3 intent to apply. There's even a way to add an estimated level 4 impact as one more question to your existing post-event survey. Now, I got enough information gathered through my LMS for efficiency metric post-event survey all the way up to level 4, that to your point, Paul, I can do a lot with that. I can get insight into whether it's likely to be applied, likely to have impact. Do I have a problem? Do I need to stop the production of this course? Do we need to fix it before we go on? Do I need to go back and meet with the goal owner or supervisors? And this is all information that they're going to be interested in as well. And part of this also is understanding that not every course is the same. And for most of what we do, it isn't going to have an impact on one of our CEO's top 5 goals. It's compliance training, it's onboarding, it's basic skills. Very important, very important. And we're the ones tasked with doing it. But it isn't going to directly affect our sales, our productivity. It's not going to directly affect that. And that's okay. So you've got basic skills, you've got team building, communication skills, introduction to AI. Those are not strategic programs linked to the goal of your CEO. Teaching people how to serve customers in a restaurant, how to cook the burgers in the kitchen. That doesn't relate directly to a CEO's goals. But if you didn't have that, and if people don't know that, you're in big trouble. So it's just expected employees are going to have the basic knowledge they need. That's up to us to make sure they do. But we don't need for them, you'd want to do level 0, 1, 2, and 3 but you don't need to worry about levels 4 and 5. So don't pressure yourself. Don't think I have to come up with an outcome measure. You don't need an ROI for everything. Save level 4 and level 5 for those highly visible, strategically aligned programs when you have an opportunity to develop learning in partnership with the head of sales, with the head of manufacturing, with the head of quality, with the head of HR. And you're going after specific targets. I want to improve sales by this much. We both agree learning has a role to play. We think learning can get us 20% or 30% of the way towards that goal. Now we're talking about goal-based strategic learning. And for that, we're going to want to use all of our measurement tools all the way up through level 4 and level 5, because they're going to want to know what's in it for me. What impact are you having on company results?
Hmm.
And Philips has done a lot of work in this. They surveyed the CEOs. CEOs say what they most want from L&D is to know level 4 impact. And that's the measure they are least likely to get today from their L&D department. But again, let's not scare everyone with thinking they have to do this for every course. They don't. It's just for those few courses that support those very high, specific, measurable goals. You should take it to level 4 and 5. The rest you want to do efficiently and effectively.
Hmm. You've used the phrase goal-based a few different times, and we also sometimes hear the phrase skills and role-based as well. From your model, whether it's in the standard or not, from your own other experiences as well, are those all synonymous? Are they different? How do those different
Yeah,
things
great
interplay?
question. And no, this isn't directly in the standard, but it's a topic I think it's important to us because right now, if you look at webinar and conference topics, role-based, skill-based learning is the current thing. There's a lot of publicity around it. A lot of people, especially are urging organizations to do a better job in developing this role-based learning. And by that, I mean the L department goes and talks to supervisors in different departments of your company, and you identify roles for each employee, and then you come up with skills to help employees with that role to improve their proficiency in that role. And I think that's wonderful. And I wish you would have had the AI at the time and the resources when I was at Caterpillar to do that for all our roles, because you can do learning journeys, maps for employees that give them guidance saying, if you want to move into finance from accounting, here are the skills you're going to need for that. And here's the learning to help you accomplish those specific skills to help you not only do a better job now, but to prepare you better for future jobs. And I think that's wonderful. But Chris, to your point, not to confuse that with strategic goal-based learning. Strategic goal-based learning starts differently, it executes differently, it ends differently. There's two entirely different types of learning. For this goal-based strategic learning, it starts by finding out from your CEO before the fiscal year starts what the goals are for the coming fiscal year and who the goal owners are going to be. And then you go talk to those goal owners and you decide whether learning has a role to play. And if it does, the two of you agree on the role learning can play, the target audience, the learning objectives, the courses for the coming year. And you agree on the planned impact that learning is going to have on sales, on productivity. And then both of you commit to all the things that are going to be required to deliver that result in this fiscal year. And then you have to use special reports called management reports, not scorecards, not dashboards, but the same type of reports that people in sales and manufacturing use, because this is going to be hard to hit that target, to deliver the planned impact of the learning. So we've got this goal-based strategic learning, which I'm afraid is being forgotten by a lot of people today in their rush to adopt the skills-based, role-based learning. In my mind, you need both, because at the end of the day, the improvement in a skill level, I mean, let's just say this harkens back to the old competency models of 25 years ago. But let's say you're a pretty mature organization, you've got roles identified, and you've got the learning tied to those roles, and you can measure proficiency of people in each role. And let's just say on average, your company right now on a 5-point scale is at 3.1 level of proficiency. And after a year of really hard work, you move the needle from 1 to 3.3. I am just afraid that the CEO and CFO are not going to be overly impressed by having spent $1 million to go from 3.1 to 3.3 if you can't say anything about business results. Just keep giving me money. We'll keep improving the skill level of our employees, and who wouldn't want that? But at the end of the day, what do I get for it? Versus goal-based learning, where you can say, here is exactly what you're getting. 2% higher sales due to learning, 3% higher productivity due to learning, 2-point increase in retention due to learning. And if you want, I can show you the bottom line value of that and the ROI. They get that. So what I'm saying is, as a CLO today, I'd make my business case, if I could, on the impact from my strategic goal-based learning. I would make that first in my presentation, in my budget plan. And then I'd say, and in addition to that, look at what we're doing to improve the skill level of all of our employees. And then I think you'd have a strong business case. Be very hard for them to say no. But all you have is I moved the corporate average skill level from 3.1 to 3.3. And no, I can't tell you what impact any of that had on the goals that you committed to for the board of directors. I think you're missing something. In fact, I've got an example of an organization we've worked with who was 1.5 years into that skill-based approach. They had 15 dedicated to it, 1 year up into it. And while we were working with them, before our third workshop, I got the call that, Dave, you can stop doing what you're doing because everyone in that group was just let go yesterday. Okay, so they had bad financial results, and what did they do? They cut all 15 people. Now, I wanted to, but I wanted to call the CEO and ask why, but I couldn't do that. I have a feeling, though, the CEO and CFO were thinking just like I was sharing with you. We can keep spending $1 million, whatever we're spending, more than that, on this group, and they don't have anything to show for it. Yes, I know training is good. I know learning is good. I want my employees to be skilled, but I'm under pressure. I've got to cut costs somewhere, and I don't have a clear line of sight into what those 15 people were doing or whether it was making any difference to the goals the board of directors is holding me accountable. So I'm eliminating them all. That's a cautionary tale of going full in on the role base. And they had none of the goal-based strategic learning. Their whole business case was, I'm going to improve our proficiency level a little bit. And after 18 months, CEO said, I've had it.
I'm thinking even if they had slightly framed the roles or skills that, hey, again, and actually tied them together. I have goal-based learning and I have 2 different groups, 3 different groups. They have different roles. I'm going to adjust the training for those roles, but I'm measuring all of them around that goal-based learning. And it made me think of one of the other pieces there too, is if you're with that goal-based learning, you're going to be getting other folks involved in the beginning. And the nice thing about this framework is you're probably not the only one. If you're scared about measurement and what to ask and everything else, probably the business partner probably has some of those same fears or challenges. So you're coming to them with a solution with this framework. But in general, sometimes people react, and there's a comment on there. What about, survey fatigue? And I think of myself, and I'm like, if I'm asked another customer satisfaction survey, I don't answer a lot of them anymore because I've just answered too many of them. I'm fatigued about that. But tell me a little bit. I think part of this framework is it has the core of what you need so you don't get too much of it, and it's an efficient way. But are there other aspects, or do you have a comment on that concern?
The framework can provide you all you need to get started, take you through all the types of effectiveness measures, and take you through the learning ops type efficiency measures, even going to include informal learning, which our profession is getting more into, like performance support tools, like content, not courses out on a learning portal, like communities of practice, like coaching, like mentoring. These are all organized informal learning. You can have effectiveness measures for each one, and you can have efficiency measures. And the standard is going to include that. So it's meant to be comprehensive to give you all that. But maybe the question is, maybe people should think of this in terms of their portfolio and how much of your portfolio is dedicated to the different types of learning. So it's not an either or, it's going to be a mix, and you want to get the mix right for your charter, your mission. At Caterpillar, we were set up to be a strategic corporate university because we had these underlying 28 business units. They kept their learning departments and they would take care of most of the operational learning in their own business unit, like on the factory floor. So I didn't have to worry about that at CatU. So our mix at Caterpillar was like 80% strategic at the corporate university, only 20% the more operational. But others are formed differently. And maybe you're McDonald's University. And if their mission is to train all the people that work in the restaurants, the front end and the back end of the kitchen, then maybe 80 or 90% of their portfolio was operational learning. And only 10 to 20% is strategic. So there isn't a right percentage for everyone. What were you chartered to do? What does your CEO expect from you in your department? Are there multiple learning departments in your organization, or are you the only one? And what is your charter? And I think that mix will depend on that. But I think every company, whether it's if you have multiple L&D departments, maybe it resides in a different L&D department, but every organization should have some strategic learning, and they're always going to have operational learning. And it's just a matter of the balance.
Very cool. Something you said way back, and the more we talk, the more I find it remarkable, is that this document is only 44 pages. I even coming in, I was assuming, well, that's going to be 200 pages, but just the sheer description of all the things that we've covered here today, and the fact that it's 44 pages, to me, that makes it almost a no-brainer for everyone in our space to get into. It doesn't feel like it's even an onerous task to read through it the first time. So that alone is a pretty remarkable achievement, and kudos to the group on that front here. Dave, it's been an absolute pleasure having joined us here today for today's discussion. Awesome questions in the chat too, folks. We really appreciate the feedback loop that we get through the chat questions, raising thoughts and sharing, etc. It's a really important part of what we get to do here on Idiotics. So before we depart, one last item, of course, is to remind everybody that the reason we get to do Instructional Designers in Offices Drinking Coffee is because we're brought to you here by Domino. Check us out, DOMINKNOW.com. A lot of organizations find great value in the ways that we can help them create, manage, and deliver impactful learning at scale. And as always, making sure that you're thinking about all those measurements that are going to be so required for making sure that you're proving value for all of the decisions that you're making, whether that's programs at large or even your tool selections, et cetera, too. Dave, hey, thanks for joining us. We really appreciated the chat. And I think it's time to dance on out of here.